Welcome to the City Rev Life podcast. My name's Pastor Roby. I've got Pastor Angel here. We are, if you're listening and not viewing, he waved very strangely just then. If
It
you're
was
actually
a
watching.
circular wave, very
It was like he's cleaning a window.
Yeah.
Like a wax on, wax off type of scenario. And in this episode, we are talking about conversations you should have with your teen, especially in a season like this, because you have a lot more time with your teen right now. And so we're gonna be talking about that, but thank you for joining us on this episode. If you have been listening and haven't had a chance to subscribe to the City Rev Life podcast, I wanna encourage you to go ahead and subscribe. That way, every new episode, you get access to it and you're notified when that comes through, because this is such an important communication medium, especially in a season like this. So we love communicating through this. And so we're gonna talk about this a little bit, in a season like this where we're in quarantine, which, Angel, you and I were just talking about one of the things that is kind of dawning on us, that how are we going to get our hair cut? Like, I think Angel's hair is going to get more like a helmet. It's just going to get wide.
I have like a fluffy hair, so it grows out like a little afro.
Yeah, mine gets long like a 90s grunge rock star. It just goes straight down Kurt Cobain style. So that's probably what it's going to look like. Anyway, so we're talking about the conversations you should have with your teen. Now, before we jump in, I think you've got some great stuff I'm excited for you to share. But there are some parents, many parents, probably almost all parents, that are saying, I have teens. Before you tell me what to have a conversation about, I can't have a conversation about anything with my student successfully. And so just give us just briefly, just some guidelines about just having conversations with teens.
Yeah. So I actually grew up in a family that was extremely loving, but had very poor tactics in how to have conversations with me. And so I've used those experiences of how conversations have been had with me when I was a teen to really help me see this is not what I should do. And so
this is what not to do.
Exactly. So one of the things that I've learned not to do, specifically from my abuela, if you are listening, shame on you. But one of the things is really not coming at your teen as an attacker. And so what I mean by that is I can't tell you how many times growing up, I would not hear a knock on my door. The door would just slam open and I'm laying in my bed, and next thing I know, I'm being told about everything I need to do better in life. I'm being told about my armpit smell. I'm being told about everything. And it just came out of nowhere. And so it's almost like let's call this actually tornado style.
Tornado style, got it.
No warning, no preparation. Emotionally, I can't get ready for it. Just tornado, boom. Just whirlwind my life. And then the door closes and I have to just sit there and now process everything that was just vomited on me. And so that's one way, tornado style of having these conversations. Terrible. Another style, which is awful, is being called to the principal's office. When I look back at my life as a teenager and all the times I was called to the principal's office, I don't look back at those moments and remember anything I was told. I just remember how terrible I felt the whole time. The awkward moment of having to wait for this bad conversation, being told sit in this chair, and then not being given an opportunity to speak, but being told everything that needs to change about who I am. So we don't want to do tornado conversations, and we don't want to do principal office conversations.
Yes.
And so I think the best kind of way of doing it is really functioning almost like a counselor, and functioning in the same kind of way that your students deal with people that they speak to and have conversations with. Well, how does that happen? Typically, there's an appointment made. Typically, when the conversation is getting ready to be had, they don't jump right into the hard, challenging stuff. They ask you, this is the craziest part, they ask you, how do you feel? They ask you questions about you.
Yeah,
if anything, a
good.
good counselor spends a lot of time asking questions, not lecturing. And so what you'll find is students are more open to be honest and real when they've been given time to prepare for a conversation, when they've been given time to even process how they feel about something, and when they're the ones who are doing the majority of the talking. The reason why that's so significant with Generation Z is this is a generation.
Give us the ages on Generation Z. Define that for us.
Any teenager right now is Generation Z. And so 11 years old, which is not a teen, but we can kind of clump them up into that all the way towards 20 years old. And so the idea is that this generation, they've grown up in a very unique situation. They've grown up in a culture that's constantly asking their opinions, constantly asking for them to give a review, constantly asking for them to give a comment. They're always being asked, what do you think? But they don't get asked that by their parents. They don't get the opportunity to give reviews or to give feedback to their parents. And so when they're having conversations where their feedback is not being requested, they just shut down because this is not what I'm used to. When I order Uber Eats, I get a notification asking, was it good or not? Tell us what you think. A sermon, whatever it is, there's always moments for them to give feedback. And if you don't give that kind of opportunity of giving questions to your teenagers, they're gonna shut down right away. So we don't wanna do tornado conversations. We don't wanna have principal office conversations. We wanna have counseling sessions. And so what I mean by that, and when I mentioned the whole is always an appointment, making appointments with them, which is such a weird thing. Like saying to your teenager, hey, I wanna talk to you about this whole coronavirus thing, but let's talk about this later tonight. After dinner, when we put the other siblings down, after dinner, when everything's kind of chill, I want you to tell me what you think about this whole coronavirus thing. Hey, maybe tomorrow morning when you wake up, we're gonna walk the dog together. And giving them an opportunity to formulate their thoughts.
So good.
Because, and this is another thing going back to a Generation Z thing, they give their feedback on their own time with all these different comments and different reviews. There's never pressure to do it right now. So they've been trained to be given space to process. So when you jump into it like a tornado, there's no time for them to process. And it might be the reason why they never tell you anything, because they haven't been able to think yet. They're just like, oh my gosh, what's happening in my life right now? And so setting an appointment, you'll get a lot more traction with them.
That's so good. Some of that just feels foreign, but it's because we're a different generation. And so understanding this is how they're wired. And it's also having that kind of conversation does not mean relinquishing authority. You're not saying, hey, could you review my parenting? Or I just, served you that meal. Could you review that? No, you're just asking for their input. You're treating them, that they are your child, but they're an embryonic adult. And so you're treating them like an embryonic adult. They're a brand new adult. And how do I want to be treated? I don't want to be lectured. I want to be listened to and heard. And so starting to transition to, I'm going to talk to them still as an authority, but I'm going to start talking to them like I want to be spoken to. So I want to make sure we have time to get through. You've got a lot of great conversations to have with students. Let's jump into that. What are some of the conversations in a season like this that parents should be having with their teens?
Yeah, so I feel like in this kind of moment, we've got to really help them build their faith and really help them build their trust of God in this time. And one of the things that doesn't build our faith is fear, and confusion doesn't build our faith. What builds our faith is facts. And we as parents, as leaders of this younger generation, we have to help our students see facts. And there's 3 different kinds of facts that we're going to talk about in this podcast that's going to really help you know what to point your kids towards. And the first fact that we got to constantly be putting in front of our students is facts about God. When uncertainty comes up, everybody all of a sudden now wonders if God's real or not. And now everything gets put back on the table about who God is. But we need to be people who are so anchored in our trust of who He is that we can still say these are the facts about God, even when the whole world is confused and dealing with this challenging thing. So the first fact that we always have to point our students towards is the fact that Jesus hasn't changed. This has not changed His character. This has not changed the very person who Christ is. And in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8, it tells us very clearly, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And this was being written in a time of massive amounts of persecution, and this was true in times of war, this was true in times of other plagues, and this is true today. Jesus is the same. But not only do we need to help our students see the fact that Jesus has not changed, we need to help them see that God's in control now. And this is not something out of His control. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 tells us that, and we know that for all those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. What that is helping us see is that God, in His goodness, has the capacity to bring forth good out of all things. And everything in some way is a part of His his plan. And so we have to trust him. And that brings us to the third fact that we always got to put in front of our teenagers, especially now, is the fact that God is still loving. He is not a God who is in control, who's trying to harm us. He is not trying to push us further from him. He's trying to bring us closer to himself. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 37 to 39, I think this is a great passage to always read with your students about God's love. Here's what Paul has to say. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything in all creation, including coronavirus, will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. And so we have to be parents who point to these facts about God continuously.
I love that. And I think what's so critical about taking these truths, but not making it into a sermon, because again, we've got embryonic adults here. I don't want someone preaching at me, but we still have got to deliver these truths. It's so good. Jesus hasn't changed. God is in control. God is loving. All of those things were true 2 months ago when none of us were thinking about coronavirus. It's true right now in this moment, and it's true 100 years ago, as it was true in 250 AD when Christians were dealing with the plague. Okay, I mean it's God is in control. He's going to turn it around for good, and I think that one of the key ways to communicate this to a student is through vulnerability and transparency. And so, as they're sharing and you're asking, hey, so what are your thoughts? Are there any things that, I know that I've struggled with fears, any fears that you've had? And, maybe they won't share, say, well, look, I mean, I've had some fears. I mean, I've had some fears about toilet paper shortage, okay? And I've had some fears about this
fears.
and that. Yeah, I personally still have serious fears. And if Pastor Angel, we could talk after this podcast and you could help me with that.
Experience that would be.
Yeah, so... But taking it through the lens of vulnerability. So, hey, these are the truths that I am in this time clinging to. And saying it like that to your teen, rather than as if you have it all together. Our teens know we don't have it all together. So communicating it through a lens of vulnerability, which again, as an adult, that's how I want people to talk to me. And so that's how we can talk to these embryonic adults. Hey, these are the things I'm clinging to with my fears. Jesus hasn't changed. God is in control. God is loving. That vulnerability, transparency just opens them up to these truths. Okay, so facts about God, those are conversations to have. What are some other conversations we need to have?
Now, before I go into the next facts we got to talk about, we have to also remember that this is not the last season of uncertainty for your students. This is one of many that they will experience in their lifetime. And so this is your time to really teach them how to deal with challenges and suffering through all these different kinds of things. And so these conversations are so helpful because they won't be the last ones that you have with them. And so the second kinds of facts that we got to talk about with our students is really the facts about their future. A lot of our teenagers right now, pushed into the season of uncertainty, they're sad. I mean, their lives have been flipped upside down. There were students getting ready to graduate by the end of this semester. There were students getting ready to move on to college. There were students getting ready to finally get out of middle school and get into high school. There were so many things that they were longing to experience, maybe even a season. I know lacrosse seasons were frozen, and basketball seasons, and all these things that they were working so hard to do and experience has now been taken away from them. And so we have to be people who give them facts to their future. And one of the things that we could do in those moments of giving them facts of the future is helping them see who writes their story. Ooh. And speaking into the reality of, listen, your story was not written by you. Your story, as much as we wish as parents, was not written by me. I wish I could write my son's story because I would write no suffering into their story. Yeah. And that would be a bad story because it wouldn't give them good character. But the reality is we have to point them to the fact that their future is already written by God himself. So look at what Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9 tells us. The heart of man plans his ways, but the Lord establishes his steps. And so that reality is something we have to keep in front of our students of, I know you have planned to do all this stuff, but we submit our plans to him, believing that he is good enough to write out a story that's appropriate for the life he wants us to have. And so one of the things I always recommend to parents when they're teens are going through uncertainty, or someone has died, or something horrible has taken place, sit down with your teen and share stories of moments that you yourself, as an adult, have suffered and seasons of uncertainty in your life and how you saw it work out. And kind of walk them through past sufferings of yours. And now that you're further enough from it, how that has now panned out in a way that you see, if that wasn't for that, I wouldn't have experienced all this. And kind of zooming out, because one of the biggest struggles for teenagers is seeing past the present.
Yeah.
They can't see a few years down the road. They're seeing right now. This is what's being taken away from me.
Right.
This is what's terrible. This is all this right now is awful. Help them pick their head up a little bit and say, no. Let's look down the road a little bit.
Yeah.
And let me show you some examples of that.
Yeah, and there's ways in which their brains are still formulating the capacity to think in that way, to think down the road. And I would just encourage parents to realize, I mean, prom at this point in an adult parent's life is like, it's such a detail. But in their world, they're grieving. They're grieving the play they had waited for years, and now they're a senior and they actually have a good role in it.
Or that one guy who just got the girl to say yes. Like he's been working together, friend zone for 5 years, and she's just said yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, and he's finally dating her, and now he's, dating her on Instagram. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, they're really grieving, and that's okay, and they should be, and we can be empathetic, and I love that. Then share a story when you grieved. And it forced, as you as a parent, to respect that God's writing my story. I don't write my story, and that it's okay that this is not how I wanted my story to go. But I see now that what the Lord did through that, and then give them space to grieve through that. I think that's so good. All right, give us one more. So we have facts about God, facts about their future. What else?
And so this one's a little bit different, but in this time of the coronavirus, we're spending a lot of time at home. And we might be spending too much time. And it's so important to help our students understand facts about their role in the household and in the family. And, it's interesting because if I was to have a tea bag in my hand right now, you would look at that tea bag and not really understand what flavor that tea bag is unless you saw a tag or something like that. But when you drop that tea bag into hot water, you develop a better understanding because the hot water brings out what's inside the tea bag. And the reality is that this whole quarantine issue and coronavirus stuff, it's bringing out what's already in our family. The hot water is forcing out the flavor of our family. And so we're seeing really what our family is now. And so if you're in a household where your teen has just locked themselves in their room for however long this has been, if you're in a family where you have not seen your teen since this whole thing began, the reality is that it reveals what's in the family. And so sitting down with your student and saying to them, listen, I want this whole situation, I want this whole scenario to make our family better. I want our family to be closer. I want to know you better as my teenager. I want to know you better. I want to know your hobbies. I want to look back to the season and say our family was enhanced because of the coronavirus. Yeah. And so sitting down and really giving them facts about the role they play with your family and how they're being present and how they're not being rude or harsh really allows for the family to be better. One of the things that we've been doing with my 5-year-old and my 3-year-old, they whine a lot. And my 3-year-old, sometimes I just look at him, I'm just thinking, bro, you got food, clothes, bro, look at this house, why are you whining? But they're always, I feel like they just walk around the world looking for a reason to just whine. And so one of the things that we've done is we've tried to say, okay, instead of being upset or putting them in timeout for them whining and giving them more reason to be whiny, we've been having this conversation where we sit them down and ask them these same questions. What kind of family do you want? Do you want a fun family? Yes, Papi. Do you want a family that loves each other? Yes, Papi. Do you want a family that makes the most of our time together? Yes, Papi. You want a good family, right? Yes, Papi. Then you play a role in that. And your behavior in this way does not allow us to have a fun family because we're trying to do something fun and you're ruining it. So stop whining. And we're putting on them the reality of their responsibility to the kind of family that we have in our household.
That's so good, and I would just maybe add to that when you do open up those questions, and crisis, it's that old proverbial illustration: when the sponge is squeezed, whatever is really in there comes out, and we're all being squeezed. And so it's revealing good things, and it's revealing opportunities for us to grow. And so it's revealing the good parts of our families, and every single one of us, it's revealing things in our families that need to grow. And so just remember, and when you sit down to ask those teens, hey, what do you want this family to be like? There's a good chance their initial response is not going to be mature, because they're embryonic adults. And so they're not going to handle it like an adult. They may have glad you asked, Dad. I got a list right here for
I want
starters.
field trips. I want Kool-Aid coming out of the refrigerator.
Why do you have to be such a dork, Dad? Whatever it is, I think be ready. Don't fly out. Make sure that you're modeling maturity. They may have some things. See through that. See through the hurt. They're grieving right now. See through some of that. And actually, there may be one of the most beautiful, powerful things is we as parents, it's not written in the Bible that we can't apologize and confess sins to parents. That's not relinquishing our role of authority. That is modeling what mature, godly adults do. And that doesn't mean that we've lost our moral authority to hold them accountable for their actions. Our authority is because we're parents. It's not that we're perfect. And so there may be things that come out of that conversation that there's some things you can clear the air at, and maybe just own to your student, you know what, you're right. I don't want to do that. And I'm sorry that I act like that at times, and I don't want to do that anymore. And so I think there's some things that can clear the air. This can be some of the most beautiful moments with our family.
But don't have it, and I'm sorry, don't have it in a way that's condemning. You don't want to have this kind of conversation about their role in the family in a way that's punching them.
Yeah, that's good.
Our family stinks because you stink. No, have it in a way of, hey, look, you have a lot of influence here. You are a leader in our home. You play a big role with your younger siblings. You've been given gifts that if you use them properly can make our family amazing. We want you to come out of your room and use those gifts. But really spin it on them in a way that helps them see that you're inviting them to something beautiful. Yeah. You're not just trying to break them with this.
Yeah, that's great, and a great opportunity for some positive affirmation. When you come out of your room, here's the thing: there's no one that makes your little sister laugh like you do, or this is when you do that, man. It's a great opportunity to positively reinforce. So, we're gonna wrap up here. Any last thoughts, Pastor Angel, before we close?
I think one of the last things to kind of share is really try and make these conversations different. Don't just do it around a table. Go for a walk. Maybe even do something before the conversations to prepare them for it. Play a video game with them, and then afterwards have that conversation. One of the things that when I was working at a foster home, a behavior specialist told me, hey, if you're going to have a hard conversation with a student that you think might take about 30 to 40 minutes, before that, have a 20-minute interactive fun thing with them. And it's funny because that's what counselors do. Whenever they have a grief training with a child, they'll color or play a game with them before to almost let them bring down their guard before now we have a hard conversation. Yeah. So don't be the kind of person who just assumes they're just going to jump into it. Yeah. Do something interactive with them that will then give space. Go shoot basketball hoop, jump into the pool, eat dinner, do something that is not just deep. Do something that's a little shallow before you get into it.
Especially if it's something they're good at, and so that you can step into their world for a minute. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us for the City Rev Life podcast. So glad you joined us. We love you. We're praying for you, and we will see you at the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on City Rev Life. You can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review wherever you're listening to this. And we love it when you share it with your friends on social media. For more videos and content, go ahead and check us out at cityrev.org/podcast or download our City Rev Church app. Have a great day.